James Harrington, CEO of Harrington Enterprises, finalizes a $2.3 billion merger with Eastwood Technologies in his downtown Manhattan office. The air is thick with anticipation as lawyers shuffle papers across polished conference tables. James, 45, self-made and sharp-eyed, signs with his signature Mont Blanc pen while photographers capture the historic moment. With this signature, we begin a new chapter in American innovation, James announces, his voice steady despite having slept only 3 hours. The gathered executives applaud politely, their expressions a mixture of relief and calculation. His assistant, Vanessa Mitchell, stands discreetly behind him, her tablet constantly updating with stock prices jumping 12% on the news. She's worked for James for 7 years, becoming almost invisible in her efficiency, the perfect position from which to observe everything. The markets are responding well, she murmurs, leaning slightly toward James. Your investors are thrilled. 7 years of groundwork, James responds quietly, worth every sleepless night. Outside, New York basks in summer heat, skyscrapers, reflecting sunlight like mirrors as pedestrians move in endless streams below. Inside the climate-controlled boardroom, Richard Eastwood, founder of Eastwood Technologies, approaches James with an extended hand. Congratulations, James. My father started this company in his garage. He'd be proud to see it joining forces with Harrington. We'll honor that legacy, James replies, noting how Eastwood's smile doesn't quite reach his eyes. No one notices the subtle tension in Vanessa's shoulders or the calculating glance she exchanges with Eastwood's CFO, Michael Barnes, as champagne flutes are distributed. To synergy, Barnes toasts, his Harvard-educated drawl carrying across the room. To the future, James counters, unaware that these men define that future very differently than he does. Chapter 2, Family Celebration. Extended. That evening, James hosts a small celebration at his Westchester estate. The sprawling property's gardens bloom with hydrangeas as caterers prepare gourmet appetizers in the kitchen, the smell of truffle oil and fresh herbs filling the air. His wife, Catherine, elegant in a navy dress that complements her blonde hair, manages the event with practiced ease. A former event coordinator before becoming a philanthropist, she knows exactly how to create an atmosphere of casual luxury. The Petersons just arrived, she informs James, kissing his cheek. Tried to mention Jennifer's fundraiser. She's been dying to get Harrington involved. Their daughter Emma, 7, plays hide and seek with the neighbor's children on the expansive lawn. Her laughter carries across the property, a sound that always centers James regardless of business pressures. James pours champagne for close friends and key executives, making toasts about new beginnings while mentally cataloging who attended from both companies. These social dynamics often revealed alliances and tensions mere spreadsheets couldn't capture. To James, David Chen raises his glass, the only CEO I know who reads financial reports at his kids' soccer games. Laughter ripples through the gathered guests. James smiles, acknowledging the gentle ribbing from his CFO and oldest friend. His brother-in-law, Mark Wilson, congratulates him enthusiastically, perhaps too enthusiastically. Mark's investment firm had struggled recently, and his designer watch and bespoke suit seemed at odds with rumors of his financial difficulties. Brilliant move, James, Mark says, clapping him on the shoulder. Catherine told me the Eastwood acquisition has been your white whale for years. Not an acquisition, Mark, a merger of equals, James corrects gently, noting how Mark's eyes keep drifting toward the house. Later, retrieving a special bottle of scotch from his home office, James notices Mark taking photos of documents left casually on his desk. The papers aren't confidential, just press releases and public merger announcements, but the behavior strikes him as odd. Looking for something? James asks from the doorway. Mark startles, nearly dropping his phone. Just admiring your press coverage. Front page of the Wall Street Journal. Impressive. James dismisses his concern as paranoia from exhaustion. But something about Mark's too wide smile lingers in his mind as they rejoin the party. Chapter 3. First Signs. Extended. 3 days later, James notices discrepancies in transition reports. Sitting in his corner office, air conditioning battling the July heat, he reviews figures that don't align with merger terms. The projected technology integration costs have somehow doubled since the signing, and certain intellectual property rights have notes about pending review that weren't in the original agreement. "David, these numbers don't match what we agreed to," James says, turning his monitor toward his CFO. David Chen, methodical and calm as always, adjusts his glasses as he examines the spreadsheets. "That's strange. These came directly from the Eastwood financial team yesterday. Can we access the originals from our secure server?" "Of course," David responds, typing rapidly. His expression shifts subtly. "That's odd. The server shows these as the originals, but I distinctly remember different figures. Could it be a synchronization error?" "Possibly," David says, but his tone suggests he doesn't believe it. "I'll have it investigate." James's corner office provides a panoramic view of Manhattan, but today the vista of architectural marvels and bustling streets below doesn't bring its usual satisfaction. The office buzzes with integration teams, new faces from Eastwood mixing with Harrington veterans, creating an atmosphere where information flows too freely. Vanessa enters with his afternoon schedule and a stack of reports requiring signatures. "Mr. Barnes requested access to the R&D server for the integration team," she mentions casually. "I told him they'd need your authorization." "Why would they need that access already? We haven't even finalized the integration plan," James questions. "He said something about preliminary assessments," Vanessa replies, her expression professional and unreadable. "Should I decline the request?" "Yes, for now. Tell him we'll revisit once the Joint Committee establishes protocols." After she leaves, James calls his lawyer, Andrew Patterson, who recommends patience. Post-merger integration always has hiccups. "James, document everything, but don't create friction when relationships are still forming." That night, James helps Emma with her bedtime routine, reading her favorite story about a brave little rabbit. As he tucks her in, she mentions casually, "Daddy, I saw the lady with red hair taking pictures of your special papers in your office during the party." James pauses. "What lady with red hair, sweetheart?" "The one who works with you. She was in your office for a long time when everyone was outside." "Vanessa has auburn hair," James realizes. "What was she doing exactly?" Emma yawns, already drifting towards sleep. "Taking pictures of the papers in the blue folder. Then she talked on the phone very quietly." James kisses her forehead, mind racing. The blue folder had contained preliminary patent applications for Harrington's newest technology, not public information. "Thank you for telling me, Emma. Sweet dreams." By the time he reaches his own bedroom, 3 urgent emails demand his attention, and Emma's concerning observation gets filed away, a critical mistake he'll soon regret. Chapter 4. Emma's Warning. Extended. Sunday morning dawns clear and bright. James works in his home study, reviewing merger integration schedules, while Catherine takes Emma to her swimming lesson. The house is quiet, except for the occasional call of birds from the garden. James rubs his eyes, tired from analyzing reports that seem to shift like sand beneath his fingers. Every day, small changes appear in documents he thought finalized. Each change, individually defensible as a clarification, collectively moves authority and assets subtly toward Eastwood's control. The front door opens, and he hears Emma's voice echoing through the house as she describes her swimming progress. To Catherine, footsteps patter down the hallway, and Emma appears in his doorway, still in her swimsuit with a towel wrapped around her shoulders, wet hair dripping onto the hardwood floor. "Daddy, I need to tell you something important," she says, clutching her stuffed rabbit Hoppy tight against her chest. What is it, sweetheart? James saves his document and turns away from the computer, noting the unusual seriousness in his daughter's expression. Emma approaches slowly, her voice dropping to a whisper. She locked the real papers away. She said no one would find them. James leans forward, gently pulling Emma onto his lap. Who did, honey? What papers are you talking about? Miss Vanessa, Emma replies, tears forming in her large brown eyes. I wasn't trying to spy, Daddy, but I heard grown-up voices in the garden house when I was looking for Hoppy after he ran away during your party. James feels his heartbeat quicken. It's okay, Emma. You're not in trouble. What did Miss Vanessa say exactly? Emma's forehead creases with concentration. She was talking to Uncle Mark in the garden house. She said, James won't notice the changes until it's too late. Then Uncle Mark said something about Pierce will be pleased. Then she said, you'd lose everything. James feels cold despite the warm day. The garden house, Catherine's pride and joy, a Victorian-style greenhouse converted into a reading room, sits at the far end of the property, away from the main celebration area. The perfect place for a private conversation no one was meant to overhear. Did they see you, Emma? He asks gently. She shakes her head. I hid behind the big fern plant. I was scared. Why would Miss Vanessa want you to lose things, Daddy? She's your helper. James remembers Mark photographing documents, Vanessa's unusual access requests, the shifting language in merger documents. Children notice things adults dismiss, unfiltered by expectations and professional trust. He hugs Emma tightly. Sometimes people aren't what they seem, sweetheart. But don't worry, you've been very brave telling me this. Are you going to check your special safe? Emma asks innocently. That's where you keep important things, right? You showed me once. James stares at his daughter, realization dawning. Yes, Emma, that's exactly what I need to do. He calls for Catherine to take Emma for lunch, while his mind races toward the implications of what he's just learned. His most trusted assistant and his brother-in-law conspiring with someone named Pierce, likely Jackson Pierce, the reclusive investor behind Eastwood's recent expansions. Daddy, Emma says from the doorway before leaving. I don't like Miss Vanessa anymore. She smiles with her mouth but not her eyes. Out of the mouths of babes, James thinks, heading toward his study's private alcove with growing dread. Chapter 5. The Safe, Extended Heart. Pounding, James enters his study's private alcove. The space, designed during the home's renovation 5 years ago, appears ordinary. Comfortable leather chair, small bookshelf, reading lamp, but behind an original Edward Hopper painting, a cityscape that had cost more than James's first apartment, lies his biometric safe. He swings the painting forward on concealed hinges, revealing the brushed steel door with its fingerprint scanner and keypad. Inside should be merger originals, backup drives containing proprietary algorithms and authentication codes for Harrington's most sensitive projects. James presses his thumb to the scanner, holding his breath. The light flashes green, and the mechanism clicks open. At first glance, everything appears normal. Leather portfolio containing documents, external hard drives in protective cases, envelope with handwritten codes. But something feels wrong. He removes the portfolio, opening it on his desk under strong light. The documents inside look like the originals he secured 3 days ago. Harrington-Eastwood merger agreement with signatures from both companies' executives and board members. But examining them closely, he spots subtle differences. The watermarks are missing from page 3. The paperweight feels slightly off on pages 10 through 15, heavier, more expensive stock than Harrington's legal department uses. With growing alarm, James retrieves a magnifying glass from his desk and examines his own signature. It's perfect, too perfect. The slight pressure variation in his final stroke that he's developed unconsciously over years is missing. This signature was copied, not signed. The original merger terms have been replaced with perfect forgeries containing altered clauses that would transfer controlling interest to Eastwood under specific conditions. Conditions being engineered right now through the discrepancies he's been noticing. Section 7.3, which originally limited Eastwood's access to Harrington's proprietary technology until complete integration, now reads that such access is granted immediately upon demonstration of integration potential, a subjective standard, easily manipulated. The amendment schedule, originally requiring dual company approval, now grants unilateral authority to the Transition Committee, which would be structured with an Eastwood majority according to another subtle change. James checks the digital backups, finding the files intact but wondering, in a dispute, will digital records be believed when official paper documents contradict them? Document forensics could eventually prove the forgery, but by then, control of Harrington Enterprises might already be lost. He carefully photographs the forged documents with his personal phone, then replaces everything exactly as he found it. If Vanessa went to such lengths, she'll likely check that her forgeries remain undiscovered. James sits heavily in his leather chair, mind racing. This isn't just corporate espionage, it's identity theft on a corporate scale. Someone is systematically erasing his company's DNA and replacing it with a doppelganger that looks identical but serves different masters. He needs help, but can't use company resources or normal communication channels. If Vanessa has been compromised, who else might be? How deep does this conspiracy run? James reaches for his personal phone, not his company device, and texts. A number he hasn't contacted in over a year. Need your expertise. Potential security breach. Private matter. Can you meet today? The response comes 3 minutes later from Sam Rivera, cybersecurity specialist and former White Hat hacker. Diner in White Plains, 2 p.m. Come alone. James pockets his phone, feeling the weight of discovery pressing on him. In the kitchen, he can hear Emma laughing with Catherine about something, the sound a painful reminder of what's at stake. Not just his company, but the security and future he's built for his family. Chapter 6, Digital Footprints Extended. The Bellhaven Diner in White Plains hasn't changed in 20 years. Vinyl booths worn smooth by decades of customers, laminated menus offering comfort food at reasonable prices, and most importantly, no corporate connections or surveillance cameras inside. James arrives 15 minutes early, choosing a booth at the back with a view of both the entrance and the emergency exit. He orders coffee and waits, watching raindrops begin to streak the windows as summer storm clouds gather. Sam Rivera enters at exactly 2 p.m., shaking water from his jacket. At 37, he looks like a computer science professor having a rough semester. Rumpled, clothes, 3-day stubble, and perpetually tired eyes that miss nothing. Before founding his cybersecurity firm, Sam had been the nightmare of several financial institutions, exposing their vulnerabilities and then helping fix them, usually without their initial consent. "You look terrible," Sam observes, sliding into the booth, which means business is either very good or very bad. "Since you texted from your personal phone after radio silence for a year, I'm betting on bad." The waitress brings Sam coffee without asking. He's apparently a regular. "I need absolute discretion," James begins after she walks away. "You didn't call me for my charming personality," Sam replies, adding an alarming amount of sugar to his coffee. "What happened?" James explains the situation in measured terms, the merger, the discrepancies, the forged documents, and Emma's overheard conversation. Sam listens without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a paper napkin rather than any electronic device. So you need to know how deep this goes digitally, Sam summarizes. Smart move not bringing any company devices. Let me see your personal phone. Sam takes James's phone, removes the battery, and places both on the table. They make these things. Too difficult to open these days, he mutters. Planned obsolescence. From his battered messenger bag, Sam produces a laptop that looks assembled from spare parts, powers it up, and connects a series of cables to a small device. This will scan for any hardware or software compromises. While the scan runs, the waitress refills their coffee cups as rain intensifies outside, streaking the windows and turning the parking lot into a small lake. Your phone's clean, Sam eventually announces. Now, about your company systems. He turns the laptop to show access logs he's somehow obtained. James doesn't ask how, displaying systematic access to James's files dating back 6 months. See these login patterns? Someone's been accessing your confidential servers every Tuesday and Thursday evening between 7:30 and 9:45 p.m. That's oddly specific timing. James frowns. Board meetings. I'm always in the boardroom during those hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Exactly. They've been planning this since before merger talks went public, Sam explains, scrolling through more data. Your system shows unauthorized encryption key generation. They're creating backdoors to maintain access, even if primary credentials change. Can you trace who's responsible? The access points are sophisticated, routed through multiple VPNs. But there's a pattern. Most originate from 3 locations: your company headquarters, indicating inside access, a residential IP in Manhattan's Upper East Side, and a 3rd location. Sam pauses, typing rapidly. Interesting. The 3rd location is registered to a shell company that traces back to Cayman Islands incorporation papers. One of the directors listed is a J. Pierce. Jackson Pierce, James confirms grimly. Eastwood's shadow investor. Sam closes his laptop. You're facing a sophisticated corporate takeover disguised as a merger. They're manipulating digital records, creating paper forgeries, and establishing a false narrative. Once complete, they could essentially erase your control and rewrite corporate history. How do I fight this? Carefully, Sam warns. They've established multiple systems. You need counter-evidence that can't be manipulated. You need witnesses they don't know about, and you need to operate completely outside their surveillance network. The waitress brings their check as the rain begins to ease. I'll create secure communication channels for us, Sam says, scribbling an alphanumeric code on a napkin. Memorize this and destroy it. It's a one-time authentication key for a secure server I control. James stares at the code, committing it to memory before tearing the napkin into tiny pieces. One more thing, Sam adds as they prepare to leave. Whoever orchestrated this has resources, patience, and inside knowledge. This isn't just business, it's personal. They know you, James. They've studied you. Consider why. As they exit the diner, the rain has stopped, but dark clouds still loom overhead. An appropriate metaphor, James thinks, for what awaits him back in Manhattan. Chapter 7. The Inner Circle. Extended. Rachel Wong's Brooklyn brownstone offers both security and anonymity. The corporate lawyer has owned this property under her grandmother's maiden name for 15 years, a fact known to very few people and connected to none of her official records. The living room, with its mixture of antique furniture and modern art, reflects Rachel's precise personality, traditional foundations supporting contemporary thinking. Large windows would normally offer views of the tree-lined street, but tonight heavy curtains are drawn against potential observation. James arrives separately from each of his trusted allies, using transportation methods that break typical patterns. David Chen takes the subway rather than his usual car service. Miguel Santana, head of security with 20 years of military intelligence background, arrives by bicycle, his muscular frame and close-cropped hair making him look like an off-duty athlete rather than a security expert. No phones, no devices, Miguel instructs as everyone arrives, placing a signal jammer on Rachel's coffee table. This disrupts standard surveillance equipment but speaks softly anyway. James reveals everything. The forged documents, Emma's warning, digital evidence from Sam, and the emerging picture of conspiracy. Rachel takes meticulous notes on paper, while David sketches financial flowcharts that trace possible fund movements. The legal structure is elegant, Rachel admits grudgingly. Professional appreciation mixing with personal outrage. They've created parallel authorities within legitimate merger terms. If these forged documents became the recognized versions, they could trigger control transfers without technically violating corporate law. The financial angle is equally sophisticated, David adds, his normally calm demeanor tense. I've identified unusual options, trading patterns suggesting preparation for significant Harrington stock movement, consistent with a hostile takeover. Someone's positioning to profit enormously from your losing control. Miguel paces near the windows, occasionally peeking through the curtains. Security footage confirms Vanessa entering restricted areas after hours at least 17 times in the past month. She's used her legitimate access to create new credentials for others, including 3 individuals whose employment records appeared in our system just after merger announcement, but who have never physically badged into our buildings. Ghost employees, James realizes, creating the appearance of legitimate access. Outside, Brooklyn Bridge lights shimmer against darkening skies as they form a counter-strategy. Rachel drafts legal maneuvers to protect corporate assets without alerting conspirators. David identifies financial tripwires that would warn of impending moves. Miguel designs surveillance of the surveillance, ways to monitor those watching James without revealing their knowledge. We need to consider Catherine and Emma's safety, James says soberly, if they're willing to go this far professionally. Already addressed, Miguel interrupts. I've placed 2 of my most trusted people near your home. They appear to be a new landscaping service. Additionally, I've upgraded your home security system through a separate contractor, not our usual provider. Tomorrow's board meeting will be their first major move, Rachel predicts, consulting her notes. Based on the altered documents, they believe they have authority to initiate a vote of no confidence. We need to be prepared without showing our hand. What about Vanessa? David asks. She has access to your scheduled communications. We maintain the illusion of normalcy, James decides after consideration. I'll continue working with her as usual while we gather evidence. If she suspects we know, they'll accelerate their timeline or destroy evidence. As midnight approaches, they finalize their immediate strategy, a defensive plan buying time while building a counteroffensive. They depart separately, each carrying pieces of information, but no one carrying everything, reducing vulnerability should any one person be compromised. Rachel walks James to the door after the others leave. You know this wasn't random, right? Pierce targeted you specifically. This level of planning, the personal connections through Mark and Vanessa, it's vindictive, not just opportunistic. I know, James acknowledges. But why? I've never had dealings with Pierce before the merger. Discussions. Sometimes in law, when motivation seems absent, we look further back, Rachel advises. This feels like retaliation, not initiation. James steps into the Brooklyn night, her words echoing in his mind as he hails a taxi using cash, rather than apps that would track his movement. In the back seat, watching the city lights reflect on the East River, he searches his memory for connections to Jackson Pierce, a man he's met only twice, briefly, during merger negotiations. What history could possibly justify this level of calculated betrayal? Chapter 8. Corporate Shadows Extended. Monday morning at Harrington Enterprises headquarters begins like any other. The security desk greets James with professional nods. The elevator ascends smoothly to the executive floor, and Vanessa waits by his office door with his schedule and a cup of coffee prepared exactly as he prefers. "Good morning, Mr. Harrington," she says pleasantly, her auburn hair pulled back in a perfect chignon. "You have strategy meetings until 11, then the quarterly review at 2. Also, Mr. Barnes from Eastwood called. There's apparently an emergency, or board meeting at noon." Emergency meeting. James accepts the coffee, careful to maintain his usual demeanor despite knowing Vanessa's betrayal. What's the agenda? He didn't specify, just said all board members are required to attend. Vanessa's expression reveals nothing unusual, the same efficient professionalism she's displayed for 7 years. "Shall I rearrange your lunch with the development team?" "Please do," James replies, entering his office, "and find out what you can about this meeting." "Of course," she responds, closing his door. James sets the coffee aside untouched, a small precaution that feels simultaneously paranoid and prudent. Using his secured phone, he sends prearranged signals to his allies, a weather comment to David, indicating the accelerated timeline, a lunch cancellation to Rachel activating their legal countermeasures. At precisely noon, James enters the boardroom to find it already filled, unusual for a company where arriving 5 minutes early is standard practice. Eastwood executives occupy one side of the massive mahogany table, while Harrington board members sit opposite, looking confused and uncomfortable. Michael Barnes stands at the head of the table, effectively usurping James's traditional position. "Ah, James, thank you for joining us. We've called this emergency session to address urgent concerns about integration processes." "I don't recall authorizing an emergency board meeting," James responds calmly, taking a seat midway down the table, a strategic choice allowing him to observe all participants. Under Section 5.2 of the merger agreement, transition authorities include emergency convening powers. Barnes counters smoothly, distributing folders to board members. These documents outline serious concerns about financial management during the transition period. James watches his board members' expressions as they open the folders. Confusion, concern, and in some cases alarm spreads across their faces as they review fabricated evidence suggesting James has been manipulating integration to maintain improper control of key technologies. Using forged documents, likely the ones Emma had seen Vanessa handling, they question James's leadership, suggesting he's deliberately undermining the merger to maintain personal control, contrary to shareholder interests. James notices Richard Eastwood sitting silently at the far end, letting Barnes lead the attack. Eastwood's expression suggests discomfort rather than conviction, a man perhaps not fully aware of the scheme being executed in his company's name. "These are serious allegations," James acknowledges, maintaining composure, which is precisely why they should be addressed through proper channels. Board bylaws require 48-hour notice for meetings addressing leadership concerns, as everyone here knows. "Extraordinary circumstances," Barnes begins, "still require proper governance," James interrupts firmly, "unless the board wishes to establish a precedent that panic overrides procedure, a concerning message to our shareholders." Several Harrington board members nod in agreement, giving James an opening. "I move we adjourn and reconvene Wednesday after proper review of these materials by all parties, including our General Counsel." Before Barnes can object, Walter Thompson, the board's longest-serving member at 72, seconds the motion. "Proper procedure protects everyone, including Eastwood's interests. I second the adjournment." The procedural vote passes narrowly, buying James precious time. As board members gather their materials, Walter approaches James in the hallway outside, his weathered face grave beneath silver hair. "They approached me 6 months ago," Walter whispers, eyes darting to ensure they're not overheard. "Others, too. Offered board positions in the restructured company. Promised generous compensation packages for those who cooperated. Be careful, James. This isn't a merger, it's a calculated conquest." James nods slightly, acknowledging the information without responding verbally. Walking back to his office through the gleaming corridor of the company he built over 20 years, he feels eyes following him. Colleagues and employees watching with uncertainty, loyalties tested as rumors inevitably spread. In his office, he finds Vanessa has rescheduled his afternoon, creating space to prepare responses to board concerns. Her efficiency in anticipating needs that serve the conspiracy's interests now seems obvious in retrospect. "Thank you, Vanessa," he says, wondering how many conversations in this office she's reported to Pierce. "Please hold all calls, except from board members. I need to review these materials thoroughly." "Of course," she replies with a perfect professional smile that, as Emma observed, never quite reaches her eyes. "Would you like me to contact legal for preliminary responses?" "Not yet. I'll handle initial review personally." After she leaves, James activates Sam's signal jammer, disguised as a power bank on his desk, a precaution against listening devices. He then texts Rachel, "Wednesday showdown confirmed. Accelerate all preparations." The response comes quickly. "Evidence acquisition. In progress. Storage facility identified. Court orders being processed." James stares out his office window at the Manhattan skyline, monuments to ambition and vision rising from the island's bedrock. He built Harrington Enterprises with the same fundamental principles, solid foundations supporting ambitious heights. Now those foundations are under attack, and the next 48 hours will determine whether his life's work survives or crumbles. Chapter 9. Emma's Memory Extended. James arrives home earlier than usual, the weight of corporate conspiracy temporarily set aside for what might be the most crucial investigation of all, his daughter's observations. Children perceive without filters, notice patterns adults dismiss, and lack the preconceptions that blind grown-ups to unexpected betrayals. He finds Emma in the backyard, teaching her stuffed rabbit Hoppy how to play hopscotch on painted stones. Catherine watches from the patio, laptop open to foundation work, but her attention clearly on their daughter's imaginative play. "You're home early," Catherine observes as James kisses her cheek. "Everything okay at work?" "Just wanted some family time," he answers, the partial truth easier than explaining the full situation before he's gathered all the facts. "How was your day?" "Foundation Board approved the new children's literacy program," Catherine smiles, her passion for educational philanthropy momentarily displacing her concern about his unusual schedule. 10 schools in underserved neighborhoods will get fully stocked libraries and reading specialists. Emma spots James and races over, Hoppy bouncing along in her grip. "Daddy, you're home for playtime." "I am," he confirms, lifting her into a hug. "And I was hoping you could help me with something important." Catherine raises an eyebrow at his serious tone, but doesn't interrupt, as James carries Emma to the cushioned patio furniture. "Remember what you told me about Miss Vanessa and Uncle Mark talking in the garden house?" James asks gently. Emma nods, suddenly solemn. "Am I in trouble?" "Absolutely not," James assures her. "You did exactly right telling me. I just need to know everything you remember about that day. It's like being a detective. Every detail matters." Catherine moves closer, maternal instincts alert. "What's this about, James?" "I'll explain everything later," he promises. "Right now, Emma's observations might be very important." Emma sits cross-legged on the cushion, Hoppy positioned carefully beside her. It was during your big party. I was playing hide and seek with Tyler and Madison, but they always hide in the same places, so it wasn't very fun. Where were they hiding? James asks, establishing timeline context. Tyler was behind the big oak tree, and Madison was under the catering table. Emma explains, with the exasperation only a 7-year-old can muster toward such predictable playmates. So, I was counting, and Hoppy jumped out of my arms and ran away toward the garden. So you went looking for him? Emma nods. I followed him past the rose bushes and around the pond. He went inside the garden house through the little door that's always open for the cats. James pictures the path, a route that would have taken Emma away from the main celebration, out of sight of most guests. When I got close, I heard grown-up voices being very serious, not party voices, Emma continues. Miss Vanessa and Uncle Mark were in the garden house when I was looking for Hoppy. I peeked through the window and they were looking at papers on Great-Grandma's reading table. Great-Grandma's table refers to an antique writing desk that had belonged to Catherine's grandmother, positioned by the garden house windows for natural reading light. They didn't see me because the ferns are really big now, Emma explains, referring to the Boston ferns hanging in the garden house windows. Miss Vanessa said, once these replace the originals, the timeline accelerates. James exchanges a quick glance with Catherine, whose expression has shifted from curiosity to concern. Then Uncle Mark said something like, Pierce wants control before the patents transfer, and Miss Vanessa said, James won't notice the differences until it's too late. These documents give us everything we need. Emma's recall is impressive, likely enhanced by the natural anxiety of overhearing adults speaking in secretive tones. Did they say anything else you remember? James prompts gently. Emma's forehead creases with concentration. Miss Vanessa said something about digital keys and offshore accounts. She said, even if he suspects, he can't prove anything once these are in place. Then Uncle Mark looked worried and said, what about Catherine and Emma? And Miss Vanessa said, Pierce doesn't want family complications. They'll be taken care of. Catherine's hand covers her mouth, the implications of taken care of hanging ominously in the air. Uncle Mark asked about the original papers, and Miss Vanessa said they needed to keep them somewhere no one would look, but where they could access them if necessary. She called it an insurance policy? Did they say where they were keeping these papers? James asks, maintaining calm, despite the confirmation of his fears. Emma nods. That's when Miss Vanessa opened one of Great-Grandma's special books, the big green one about plants. It's hollow inside. She put papers in there and said no one ever uses the garden house library except Catherine, and she never touches the old books. Catherine looks stricken. My mother's botanical collection, the Illustrated Encyclopedia of American Horticulture. It was her favorite. After they put the papers in the book, they left through the side door, Emma finishes. I found Hoppy hiding under a chair, and we went back to the party. I didn't tell anyone because they sounded like it was a secret, and grown-ups get mad when kids hear their secrets. James hugs Emma tightly. You did exactly right telling me now. You're very brave and very smart. Is something bad happening, Daddy? Emma asks, intuitive enough to sense the tension beneath his praise. Some grown-ups aren't being honest at work, James explains simply, but knowing what you heard helps me fix the problem. Catherine gestures toward the house. Emma, why don't you go inside and ask Maria for a special snack? Tell her I said it's okay to have ice cream before dinner, just this once. Once Emma skips inside, Catherine turns to James, her expression a mixture of anger and fear. My brother is involved in some corporate espionage against you with your assistant? And who is this Pierce person threatening our family? James takes her hands. I was going to tell you tonight. I've discovered a conspiracy to take control of the company using forged documents. Jackson Pierce, the investor behind Eastwood, appears to be orchestrating it, with Vanessa and apparently Mark as inside operatives. Mark? Catherine looks pained. Why would he? I don't know yet. Money, resentment, leverage, could be anything. But right now we need to check the garden house. If the original merger documents are where Emma says, they walk briskly across the lawn as sunset casts long shadows, the garden house a Victorian silhouette against the darkening sky. Inside, the space smells of old books and potting soil. Catherine's two passions combined in one peaceful retreat. The botanical collection occupies a full bookshelf, leather-bound volumes documenting American plant life across centuries. Catherine goes directly to a massive green tome, its gold-embossed title faded with age. My mother read from this when I was little, she says softly, lifting it carefully. She'd show me illustrations of plants and tell me stories about each one. The book feels unusually light, and when Catherine opens it, they discover its center has been hollowed out, a rectangular cavity containing exactly what they're seeking, the original merger documents, complete with proper watermarks and James's authentic signature on pages without the fraudulent clauses. Emma saved everything, James says quietly, carefully examining the papers. A 7-year-old girl outsmarted corporate conspirators because they never considered a child would notice their secret meeting. Catherine's expression hardens as she processes her brother's betrayal. What do we do now? Now, James says carefully. Securing the documents in his briefcase, we prepare our counterattack, but first I think we promised our daughter ice cream. As they walk back to the house, Catherine slips her hand into his. Whatever happens with the company, we face it. Together, she says, squeezing his hand. Family first. For the first time in days, James feels grounded. The conspiracy may have infiltrated his corporate world, but they underestimated what truly matters. The bonds of family and the observant eyes of a child who notices when adult smiles don't reach their eyes. Chapter 10. Paper Trail. Extended. Rachel's law office occupies the 32nd floor of a midtown tower, the space designed to impress clients with panoramic views and meticulous attention to detail. Today, however, they've gathered in the windowless conference room normally reserved for sensitive client meetings, a space regularly swept for surveillance devices. The original merger documents recovered from Catherine's garden house library lie in the center of the polished conference table, surrounded by legal pads filled with Rachel's precise handwriting. David Chen examines financial projections on his laptop, while Miguel reviews security footage on a tablet. James paces the room's perimeter, tension evident in his shoulders. The legal vulnerability is now clear, Rachel announces, tapping a section of the original agreement. The genuine document properly limits Eastwood's integration authority, requiring joint approval for all major decisions. The forged version contains what we call a sleeper clause, section 11.4b, on page 27. She slides the forged document alongside the original, highlighting the discrepancy. This added language creates a mechanism whereby you could be found unfit to serve within 6 months if certain performance metrics aren't met. Your replacement would be determined by Eastwood's board majority, effectively surrendering control. And those metrics, James asks. Deliberately vague, Rachel says with professional disdain. Terms like adequate progress and satisfactory integration without quantifiable standards. Subjective criteria they could manipulate to trigger the clause whenever convenient. David looks up from his financial models, which explains the unusual financial reporting requirements they've been pushing. They're establishing baseline measurements they can later claim weren't met. Miguel clears his throat. We've traced Vanessa's movements extensively. After reviewing 3 months of security footage at your request, we've identified a pattern. Following the merger signing, she made 7 visits to a private vault at First Manhattan Secure Storage on East 62nd Street. He turns his tablet to show time-stamped images. Security footage shows her entering with document cases the day after the merger. She used credentials registered to a Victoria Matthews, an identity created 3 months ago with excellent forgeries. The storage facility requires court orders to access without account credentials, Rachel notes. I've prepared the necessary legal documents citing evidence of corporate fraud. Judge Williams will hear our emergency petition at 7 a.m. tomorrow. David pulls up another screen on his laptop. Meanwhile, I've uncovered the financial architecture behind this. Working backward from unusual options trading, I've identified a network of offshore accounts ready to receive diverted funds once the takeover completes. He displays a complex flowchart. Capital would move through 17 entities across 9 jurisdictions, ultimately consolidating under a Liechtenstein foundation controlled by Pierce. The structure's designed to obscure ownership while maintaining control, elegant but traceable once you know what you're looking for. So we have the motive, financial gain through acquisition of Harrington's intellectual property, James summarizes. We have the method, forged documents creating legal mechanisms for control transfer, and we have evidence of premeditation through Vanessa and Mark's involvement. What we don't have yet is Pierce's direct connection, Rachel cautions. Without that, he maintains plausible deniability. We need communications linking him directly to the conspiracy. And we need to understand why, James adds. This level of elaborate planning goes beyond normal corporate raiding. This is personal. There's something else, Miguel says hesitantly. During our surveillance, we discovered Vanessa has visited your brother-in-law's apartment 8 times in the past month. Their relationship appears to extend beyond professional conspiracy. James absorbs this information, wondering how to share it with Catherine. Her brother's betrayal already cuts deep. Learning of his romantic involvement with Vanessa would only add another layer of deception. Tomorrow morning, we move on the storage facility, James decides. Miguel, coordinate with the federal marshal who will execute the court order. David, prepare to analyze any digital devices we recover. Rachel, be ready for immediate injunction filings once we have the evidence. As they gather their materials, Rachel holds James back briefly. The conspiracy's architecture is sophisticated, meticulous, and nearly foolproof, she observes. If Emma hadn't overheard their conversation, if you hadn't noticed the discrepancies early, they would have succeeded. You need to be prepared for their contingency plans. People this thorough don't leave outcomes to chance. James nods, the weight of her warning settling alongside his other concerns. Have security increased for Catherine and Emma, he instructs Miguel, and add Walter Thompson to the protection list. He's our only confirmed board ally so far. As they depart, the setting sun casts long shadows across the Manhattan skyline, beautiful but ominous, much like the elegant conspiracy they're beginning to unravel. The pieces are coming together, but James can't shake the feeling that the most important connection remains hidden. Why Jackson Pierce, a billionaire investor with global interests, would execute such an elaborate scheme targeted specifically at him? The answer, he suspects, lies somewhere in his past. A connection he can't yet see, but that drives Pierce's methodical determination to not just acquire his company, but to systematically dismantle his professional identity. Chapter 11. Mark's leverage extended. Mark Wilson's downtown apartment offers spectacular views of the financial district, a constant reminder of the wealth and success that have always seemed just beyond his reach. The sleek, minimalist space, with its designer furniture and abstract art pieces, projects affluence, but James now recognizes it as a carefully constructed facade, much like Mark's financial career. James arrives unannounced at 8:30 p.m., knowing Mark's habits include an evening scotch by the window, a ritual James has joined many times as brother-in-law and occasional business confidant. When Mark opens the door, surprise flickers across his features before he composes himself. "James, didn't expect you tonight." He gestures toward his living room. "Come in. Drink?" "No, thank you," James replies, noting the subtle tension in Mark's movements as he closes the door. "We need to talk about Vanessa Mitchell, Jackson Pierce, and forged merger documents." Mark's hand pauses midway to the crystal decanter he'd been reaching for. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Let's not waste time with denials," James says calmly, taking a seat on the minimalist sofa that costs more than most people's monthly salary. "Emma overheard your conversation with Vanessa in the garden house. We've recovered the original documents from Catherine's botanical book." Mark pours himself a generous scotch, hand slightly unsteady. "That child has an overactive imagination. Security footage shows you entering Harrington's secure server room with Vanessa after hours on 6 separate occasions," James continues, the bluff necessary since Miguel has found no such footage yet. "Your phone records show 27 calls to a Cayman Islands number registered to Pierce's shell company. This information, partially speculation based on Sam's digital forensics, hits its mark. Mark's carefully cultivated poise cracks, his expression shifting from denial to justification. "You wouldn't understand," Mark says bitterly, dropping the pretense. "You've always had everything handed to you. Full scholarship to MIT, venture capital falling in your lap for your first startup, perfect timing on every market shift." The confrontation starts calm, but escalates as Mark moves from denial to justification, his resentment spilling out after years of careful containment. "My father was a factory worker who died in debt," James reminds him quietly. "I worked 3 jobs through college while developing my first software. Nothing was handed to me. But everything came easily." Mark's voice rises, scotch sloshing over the edge of his glass. "While I scraped for investors, begged for meetings, you casually mentioned ideas at parties and walked away with funding commitments. Do you know what that's like? Watching someone succeed effortlessly in everything you struggle with daily." The apartment's minimalist decor contrasts with Mark's growing emotional chaos, the careful image of success crumbling under pressure. "So this is revenge?" James asks. "Helping Pierce steal my company because you're jealous of my success?" "It's about justice," Mark insists, but doubt creeps into his voice. "Catherine deserves better than watching you destroy everything on your ego trips." "Catherine?" James stands now, anger finally breaking through his composed exterior. "You're betraying your sister, threatening her family's security, and you claim it's for her benefit." Pierce promised no one would get hurt," Mark counters weakly. "Just a corporate restructuring. You'd be wealthy, just not in control anymore." "And you'd finally have something I don't," James realizes. "A position at the restructured company Pierce promised you. What was it? CFO? Board seat?" Finally, Mark Wilson would step out of James Harrington's shadow. Mark turns away, staring out at the city lights. "You don't understand what it's like always being compared and found wanting. Catherine's successful husband, the tech genius, versus her struggling brother who can't keep an investment firm afloat. Where does Vanessa fit into this?" James asks, watching Mark's reaction carefully. "Professional accomplice or something more?" Mark's expression confirms Miguel's suspicions before he can deny it. "That's complicated. I'm sure Catherine will find it fascinating," James says coolly. "When she learns her brother not only conspired against her husband, but became romantically involved with the woman threatening her family's security." "Leave Catherine out of this," Mark says sharply, panic flashing across his features. "You brought her into it the moment you joined Pierce's conspiracy," James counters. What does Pierce have on you, Mark? This goes beyond jealousy or resentment. He's leveraging something specific. Mark's shoulders slump. The facade completely collapsed. My firm's been underwater for 18 months. I've been moving client funds to cover losses, falsifying returns. Pierce discovered it during his background research on you. He investigates everyone connected to potential acquisitions. Financial fraud, James says, the pieces clicking into place. He offered to bail you out and keep it quiet if you helped him. At first, it was just information he wanted. Your habits, security measures, family schedules, then documents, access to your home office during parties. Mark's voice drops. By the time I realized how far it would go, I was already implicated. Pierce made it clear, cooperate completely or face prosecution. James watches his brother-in-law, a man he's known for 15 years, shared holidays with, supported through business failures and divorce, reduced to a desperate conspirator. When did Vanessa become involved? James asks. She was already involved when Pierce approached me, Mark admits. She's been working for him for years, positioned specifically to gain your trust. The relationship between us, that developed later. I think Pierce encouraged it, another way to ensure my cooperation. When James mentions Emma's observations, Mark pales. The realization that his niece had witnessed his betrayal seems to affect him more deeply than any other revelation. Emma saw us, he whispers. Does Catherine know? Everything, James confirms, the lie necessary to apply pressure. She's struggling to understand how her brother could threaten her family. Mark moves to the window, placing his palm against the glass as if seeking connection with the city beyond. What happens now? Tomorrow morning, we're executing a court order to access the storage facility where Vanessa kept evidence, James explains. Pierce's entire conspiracy will be exposed. The question is where you'll stand when it happens. Pierce will destroy me, Mark says quietly. He already has, James counters. The question is whether you'll help us stop him from destroying others. The leverage has shifted. Mark's fear of Catherine's knowledge of his betrayal, providing more motivation than any legal threat. Family complications, it seems, cut deeper than professional consequences. What do you need from me? Mark finally asks. Everything you know about Pierce's plan, communications you've had with him, and your testimony when the time comes, James states. In exchange, I'll do what I can to minimize your legal exposure and help explain to Catherine. And Vanessa? That relationship is over, effective immediately, James says firmly. Your choice is simple. Family or conspiracy, Catherine and Emma, or Pierce and Vanessa. Mark stares at the city lights for a long moment before turning. Back, his decision visible in his expression before he speaks. I'll tell you everything. As James leaves the apartment an hour later, his phone contains recorded confessions, forwarded emails, and meeting details that provide the direct connection to Pierce they've been seeking. Mark's leverage has become their own. Another piece. In the counterattack taking shape for tomorrow's confrontation, in the elevator descending to the lobby, James calls Catherine. I've spoken with Mark. It's complicated, but he's agreed to help us. I'll explain everything when I get home. Is he okay? Catherine asks, concern for her brother evident despite his betrayal. No, James answers honestly. But he's made the right choice, finally. Family complications, James reflects, as he exits into the night, cut both ways, creating vulnerabilities conspirators can exploit, but also providing strength and motivation when most needed. Pierce's mistake was underestimating those bonds, especially the protective instincts of a mother and the observant eyes of her child.